There's a very famous saying, I'm sure we've all heard of it, comparison's the thief of joy, right? Very good saying, very interesting saying. I think it helps a lot when you're comparing yourself to somebody and you really shouldn't be, and you're like, well, this sucks, right? I think it's a great thing to hear that. However, I want to talk today about a little bit of a different perspective on this saying a guy named Jean-Jacques Rousseau had. I'm going to refer to him as Rousseau this whole time, because if I try and do my fake French accent and say Jean-Jacques this whole time, I mean, how many people just clicked off when I did it then? Imagine if I did it the whole episode, right? Rousseau would not just say that comparison's the thief of joy, he would say that comparison is the root of all evil, right? He says this in his famous thing, I don't know, famous thing, I guess it's a treatise or an essay. I don't know the difference between a treatise and an essay. Just huge stutter there. That's one of the bad things about me never going to formal schooling for philosophy and reading it all the time, is I'm just like, treatise, that sounds nice. I think it's, well, I guess it's a discourse. What Rousseau says in this discourse is that basically humanity was going along great. You know, he's like, look at the natives, look at any sort of early stage civilization, they're doing really well, you know? And this is largely true. I mean, if you look back at any, I feel like saying indigenous is probably kind of not the right umbrella term, but the Native Americans are a great example of this, right? I've as a kid was very interested in Native American history and I always found it so cool how like they were able to just be like, no, the earth is above us, you know, almost being a little bit more in tune with nature. I think this is a very popular take actually. We've discussed it before. I mean, how many guys have you heard be like, we're meant to be in the woods right now with spears, not doing computer and iPhone, right? So Rousseau basically was the first guy and the smartest guy to do this. He looked back then, he was like, wait, everything was really good when we were doing stuff like that. Like we were able to make this equality thing really happen back then, largely, right? I mean, there were problems, of course, it wasn't perfect, but we were doing pretty good. And then Rousseau's like, when did we get here? When did we get to this modern society where everybody's rude, everybody's mean, everybody's, you know, you have less money than me, you have a slightly different skin tone than me, and I'm gonna really make that my whole personality now. I'm gonna do terrible things, right? Like, when did we get here to all these bad things? Well, Rousseau's answer would be that comparison was what did this. Comparison is the root of inequality. Someday, the two guys were sitting together, maybe they were in the woods hunting, and one guy noticed, hey, that guy's arms are way bigger than mine, that guy's way cooler. No wonder, you know, he's doing so good in you know, where we're at right now. And then he gets all insecure about it, and then it leads to him overcompensating. Maybe he starts reading a bunch of books and he's like, I'm way smarter than you. And the other guy's like, wait, you're way smarter than me. And then he invents commerce and he's like, I have so much more money than you now, I have so many more possessions. And then it becomes this race that leads to where we are now. This is what Rousseau would say, right? And I think this is an interesting take. I mean, obviously Rousseau was writing this, I believe, just after the first American Revolution. This would have been written sometime in the late 1700s. So his takes aren't like 100% accurate, right? Obviously, we know a lot more about history. We know a lot more about anthropology. As much as I find his ideas awesome and interesting, they're not the most accurate thing in the world. They have, however, held up very well over time in comparison to a lot of other theories, right? Pretty solid work over here from Rousseau all around. So what do we want to do with this, right? I think there's obviously an angle in which we could be like, let's look at society and be like, let's come up with this very lovey-dovey, you know, hugs and kisses idea of like, we need to stop comparing ourselves to each other. And that's great. Like, that's something that a billion people have done. It's a great thing. It's something we should be doing. I'm all for it, right? I watch a ton of this content myself. I'm very interested in these ideas. And cool, great, like awesome. I'm all for that. But I will say, I think that's kind of a tired thing, right? I don't think I'm the best person on earth to do it. And I think that I'm just quite frankly, not in the mood to do it right now. I think I want to talk a little bit more on an introspective lens today. You know, comparison is the root of all evil. If we want to say, you know, our greedy tendencies, our bad tendencies, all come from comparison, all come from this original source of inequality, of insecurity, right? What do we extrapolate from that? I think that's interesting because oftentimes we're taught the world works in a very, you know, simple way. You are a greedy person, you are self-interested, so the world's set up in this very self-interested way, right? This is a theory that guides the way a lot of people think about things, right? When you give everybody the implicit idea that they're self-interested, greedy people, it's crazy how much you'll see people become self-interested, greedy people. I don't know why nobody thought of this, right? So I want to kind of look at the other way here, the other route, right? I think it's important to say right off the bat, as much as I'm interested in being introspective here, I'm not at all a perfect person. I also am, greedy. When I'm hanging with friends and there's 2 pieces of pizza left, I'm grabbing both those pieces of pizza. That's probably not accurate, but I will go for the last slice 100% of the time. I'm not somebody who's ever going to be like, I am an aesthetic monk. I love buying things. I love clothes. I am a consumer. And I think it's important to say this before we get off right here, but I do think it's an interesting idea. If you took every ugly part of yourself, and next time that ugly part sort of came out, and you were like, where's the comparison part of this, right? Let's say you are being mean to a friend. A friend is, let's think. What is your friend doing that you're being mean to them about? They're annoying you because they are talking too much when you're out in crowds, right? You're out, you're out of the bar, you're out with some cool people, and they're telling all their funny stories, and you're like, man, why won't he let me get it? Why won't he let me get a second? He's playing guard. Like, he's not letting me get out there for a second, right? I think we've all been here once or twice in our life. Let's examine for a second. First of all, you're not all wrong to feel this way. I think it's important to acknowledge that. But outside of that, this jealousy is an ugly thing, right? Nobody wants to feel jealous. So where is this jealousy coming from? Where do we want to look at for this jealousy? Well, you're making a comparison between yourself and your friend. Your friend's being very boisterous. He's being very loud. It sounds like he's getting a lot of laughs. That's a comparison right there that you're making. Maybe we should try not to make that comparison, Maybe you should look at how much you have in common. I think this is the big thing that this ends up doing for me whenever I think of down this kind of road in my own life of where am I comparing myself to other people? How is that hurting me? I think the conclusions I often end up coming to is not this idea that all of us are exactly the same or that comparison is not something that's going to arise eventually, but this idea that we're so much more similar than we are different. And I don't mean this in terms of like I'm not making the most simple conclusion of all time. It's a pretty simple conclusion, I guess. I'm not saying this in terms of like, guys, stop racism right now because we're all so similar. I'm not doing that in that way, although we should stop racism not because we're similar, because we're the same, right? Going down a weird rabbit hole with this whole train of thought. What I'm trying to say here is you're out of the bar with you and your friend's stealing your spotlight. Maybe instead of focusing on how much you and your friend are different, think about how the fact that you're both out with the same group of people, that you're both enjoying that time with the same people, right? Think about the fact that the jokes your friends are making are the same jokes that you would make when you're with them alone. Maybe start making some of those jokes yourself. Not only can inequality and realizing that you are, comparison in a sense be a really great way to cause division, it can also be a great way to stop division too, I think. Maybe realizing the solution to this is not so much being like, man, I should start talking, or I should be mad at my friend for talking so much. Maybe the conclusion is that, you could just not be insecure and talk a little bit more right now in this situation. Of course, it doesn't apply to everything. There are situations that are out of our control, but applying this sense of, where am I comparing this? How can, if it's something where you can get rid of that little bit of inequality that's causing your jealousy, causing your, disfavorable disposition of that moment, if you can take that and get rid of it in seconds, that's a great thing. That's something that can bring us all so much closer together. I think understanding that not everything needs to be a competition, but where can you eliminate these comparisons to make the playing field more equal, to make everybody in the room happier, I think is just a great thing to be a more holistic person, right? To maybe favor the external world a little bit less. This is something that I don't say in terms of like, you are wearing you bought clothes on Shein yesterday, how dare you? I'm not trying to do that thing. I'm not trying to be like, don't be materialistic, because as much as we can all stand to be a little less, I'm not saying that. I'm saying more so, focusing on all these things that are out there that seem huge. Often when you look at it in terms of like, how am I comparing here? What comparison am I making that's bad? Is a great way to get to the core of what's important here. When you're out with your friend and you're like, I'm jealous, they're being funnier than me right now, they're being louder than me, the right answer is never to be like, well, they're annoying. They're an attention hog. The right answer is to go, well, that's the comparison part of things, but what else is there? The fact that we're out with the same group of friends right now, the fact that I'm fortunate to have a very funny friend, the fact that, I could join in this conversation, right? The fact that I'm not sitting home alone, all these things. These are what's important in that situation, not the comparison. And I think realizing those places where everybody's on the equal footing is where that true depth in life can be found. That's my take. This is the painting, last with this color palette, and it's going out on a sore note, guys. I do not like this at all. I really think I messed this one up. I should not have tried angles. Shouldn't have tried angles. Not good. Not good at all. But yeah, go check this out over on the Instagram. I'm hoping we can wrap up the color palette series soon. I don't know 100%. It's using a lot of paint. I'm getting a little bored of it, to be quite frank with you guys. I'm ready to paint some other things, but we'll see where that goes. I don't want to put the pot before the kettle. No, the cart before the horse. I don't want to do that whole thing with the carts and the horses. I'm not trying to do that. But until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint and Talk episode 212. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.